Okay, well, I'm pleased to be talking to all of you today. As you know, we're going to be discussing the movie The Lives of Others and be analyzing it based off of the tools and criteria that we read about in the Yale Film School curriculum. Undoubtedly, you've all seen the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, our analysis is going to reveal the ending and will perhaps ruin the movie for you. So I would hope that anybody watching this has in fact seen it. Plus, you're going to miss out on some of the analysis, as what we're going to discuss is these tools and methods that the auteur brings out and utilizes to drive home his point in the movie. So we'll go ahead and start off with the opening scene here. You'll notice on the left-hand side I've talked about the specific criteria and categories that you've read about. I'm not going to go over those too much here because you all can read, but we'll focus on this opening scene here that opens, as many movies do, using some prologue text to describe the overall context in which the movie exists. Now, among the last of the prologue text here is what you see here, the time setting. Now, the time setting is important here not only because of the actual time that these events would have occurred in this historical fiction, meaning that the story is of in a historical context that actually existed, but the story itself is fiction. Um, it's important to note the time here is, late 1984. Not because of the fact that indeed it was 1984, but the mindset of the George Orwell novel 1984. An obvious play to contemporary literature in which the dystopian um, society that Orwell describes of constant police surveillance, one in which your friends could be telling on you and spying on you, which is basically what the movie uh, portrays throughout. Um, Now, in this particular scene, it's pretty dispassionate, pretty unfeeling. It's both anonymous as it is just as anonymous as it is in distant in how it's set, and the isolation that should be felt by perhaps the prisoner there. As the scene goes on, you'll notice in the upper kind of left-hand corner here, there's a light that will turn on. It will go red. The prisoner here is told to look down, and what happens is he stays still. He looks down, and another pair of folks comes down the hallway and passes them. After they pass, the red lights go off, and the prisoner is told to continue on moving. Now, it's kind of used to describe and to demonstrate the isolation that any one of these prisoners could feel, because they could be anywhere, but they couldn't describe where they were. There may be other people there. I mean, they're faintly aware that in a large building there's going to be other people, but you have no one to see or talk to. So very isolating incident that they could be in, and kind of demonstrates the, to, the totality of pressure that can be put on someone that might be facing such a thing. Well, we go on to meet and see all of the characters and see the ways in which they're living their lives and the means by which they uh, uh, express themselves in a repressed society. Fast forwarding through many of the introductions, as again many of you have seen, or all of you should have seen the movie heretofore. Um, is this scene where Dreyman is at his own birthday party, and it begins with the typical party scene where the camera is following the guy, the main character, Dreyman in this case, and there are many people there. Obviously, lots of things going on, several different things happening, but something of more important that stands out to the rest is shown by the fact that his conversation leads him to his friend here, um, who they all respect, but but have to distance themselves from because of the context of which they live. So he goes over and he sits with him, kind of offcast, and it shows again the isolation that somebody who's been blacklisted is going to be feeling, not only in society at large or with the Stasi police or anything like that, but even in the party and company of people who share his values, he's sitting off alone. And he shows a present that he's going to give to Dreyman here, and it's a novel, Brecht. And in fact, later what happens is or immediately after here, you see Captain Weiser, as he's listening to this very conversation, he'll write down the name of the book and later have to go take it. Now, it demonstrates the isolation that these two can feel in the society, but it also demonstrates how removed Captain Weiser is from the situation. He doesn't know really what is in Brecht and what is so inspiring about it, and it's here that he starts to kind of develop an affinity for Dreyman, and you see that he takes almost a personal interest, as when he wrote down what the book was, he actually wrote it down on a notepad with his pencil, as opposed to the rhythmic typing that you hear constantly throughout the movie, as he takes official documentation on the activities of Dreyman here. So again, to that dispassionate typing that we're talking about, it's a constant crosscut that they use, the editors here, to demonstrate something happening in Dreyman's life that is important and filled with emotion and passion, and drives his persona, contrasted up against the simultaneously happening cold, dry report on this typewriter. Now he takes the most intimate of relations, and while he's eavesdropping on him and Krista Marie, who are presumably having intercourse, as the text describes it here on the typewriter, and as as he as he types that out, the next cut is his assistant, who comes in to relieve him, and he says, "Oh, I love listening to artists because they're going at it all the time, as opposed to preachers and other ideologues who have it in that we listen in on. They're just not as much fun." And Captain Weiser is a quiet professional, maybe a little awkwardness. He leaves again about as cold as the typewriter, but stirring within him probably some dissonance about what is it that drives these two to be so passionate, because he is very good at his job, but has a certain lack of feeling and depth to what he's doing. Now, uh, trying to take on their place, he goes through and he does a couple of different things. Obviously, the film shows Captain Weiser. He goes in and he surveys the room, probably as a very studious thing to be doing, understanding where in time and space that his subjects are as he's eavesdropping and accounting for what his actions are. But also, he tries to take on their feelings. He goes in there and he actually lifts that book, Brecht, and there's a scene of him reading it. Uh, he patronizes a prostitute, which in the brief emotionless encounter he has with her, she mentions how, oh, there's a lot of guys in your building that we visit, um, but I don't think I've ever been here before. And he's like, no, no, you haven't, because that's not an act that he's usually accustomed to doing. But in his quest to perhaps understand more what his subjects are going through emotionally, as well as academically, as he can hear their every movement, he does these things. He reads the book. He goes out and he patronizes a prostitute. And in fact, in this particular scene, um, he baits out Dreyman to try to catch Krista Marie in the act of cheating, and he sees that she comes out of the car, and he probably has some presumptions on what happens, and there is no heated dialogue between the two, quite how Captain Weiser probably tried to ignite by setting off the bell. But rather, she just lays on the bed, and Dreyman goes to talk to his lover, and she says, "Just hold me." And simultaneously, it cuts to Captain Weisler in this pose. Now, I'll be honest. The first time I saw this, I probably mistook what he was doing here. Either A, I didn't pay it any note, or B, I figured again he was being studious, listening in on the headphones as it's showing, trying to attempt to understand exactly what's happening, so he can write a better report. And he's actually placed over the top of where he is, so he's trying to be in the place, and he's actually making the motion of, you know, cuddling down on Krista Marie as Dreyman would be doing. Now, when his assistant walks in, he very quickly and abruptly the scene zooms out. It shows him in the operations room there. He quickly and abruptly gets up, walks back over, says to his assistant, "Hey, you're 5 minutes late." Takes off his headphones and leaves as if nothing was happening. That seemed weird. Uh, his assistant presumably thought he was sleeping, but in fact, again, he's trying to embrace the emotion that Dreyman is feeling here because in his professional life as a Stasi police officer, that has just not been part of it. So it's an experience that he really hasn't had. Trying to curb the edge off of that emotion, later on he visits a bar which Krista Marie at the same time goes and visits right before she's about to uh, go again and patronize the defense minister or deputy minister or whatever his position is, basically selling out her virtues so that she can get protection and things from him. Uh, Weisler doesn't want her to do it, as he really learns to perhaps love Dreyman and Krista Marie in their passionate pursuits and learning what that is. He has the turning point after Dreyman finds out about his friend's death, and he listens to the Appassionata. He's seen crying, and so he has this turning point, and he's really kind of rooting for him. Doesn't know really what to do. He tries to give Krista Marie here a pep talk, and this is where the Artur really uses double talk in a couple different ways. So we'll see another picture later on in my presentation here of a picture of Krista Marie, because just as Weisler goes through a transformation from the stoic secret policeman and enforcer of the system, and he essentially makes the transition from bad to good, for perhaps an oversimplistic way of looking at it. She simultaneously makes a transition the other direction, where she starts out as more idealistic, kind of understandably, vying for her own survival, but she eventually sells out Dreyman to the secret police. But she says, "You're a good man," and this theme of Sonata for a Good Man has already come up once, and she identifies Weisler as a good man, and later on in the end of the movie, Sonata for a Good Man is the name of the book that Dreyman writes for Weisler. So here's the double talk. Now, the other piece of double talk that was noted was later on in the movie when Dreyman identifies her as his guardian angel, when in fact Weisler is his guardian angel in a twisted way, that he is the secret police, but he's watching his every move and actually protecting him. So great use and setup of the double talk here, and also the capturing Krista Marie as a character here in the movie. Again, when before Dreyman finds out that somehow he is ratted on, and there's a search in his house. Before that, he's trying to figure out and ascertain whether or not he has actually been bugged and people are listening. So they come up with a plot here, and this scene is great to show that crosscut of simultaneous actions with Captain Weiser and that internal conflict of what he does with the information. They plan the plot, and then Weisler is shown, about to call the border guards, and then doesn't. What's interesting about how this shot is cut here is that while they're talking about being eavesdropped on, the camera angles here, much like back in the party scene that we talked about earlier, they kind of come from around objects. They are shot from the top. Perhaps where these bugs are hidden in the house is where this lens is at. And here in this very frame, you see Dreyman looking up as if somebody is watching him, and he's testing it, right? Because he is saying, "Hey, if you're out there, you should be listening to me." And he looks at basically the camera and looks at basically Captain Weisler's bug on what they're doing. So a pretty good feel for the situation as the viewer, being in the point of view for the bug that sees it. So one of the aspects that we discuss, or that is discussed in the Yale Film School, is the use of color. Now, there's not a whole lot of play on color on the surface in the first half of the movie. Typical color film of its day, typical color film with the saturation similar to the days of 1984, even though it's a movie in the mid 2000s. Unlike Schindler's List, which was shot deliberately in black and white and had one little girl shown in her little red coat. And unlike, as the Yale Film School curriculum discusses, red being used as passionate or and things like that, and passionate in the lustful sense, here they use red as that red ink, the culpable, damning typewriter that has forensic traces which the Germans can link back to this particular typewriter. Now, of course, it's red ribbon, so instinctively you see something in red type in the movie and you understand it's from this contraband typewriter. But more than that, the red is shown as the passion for the artist, the passion for what he's doing, rather than simply the lustful passion that we typically think of as shown in the film school. And it is also a fingerprint, on his work, right? So that typewriter has a certain fingerprint to it, where forensics will tie it back to that, and then it is a actual fingerprint which Dreyman eventually sees on the Stasi report that makes the light all click in him and realize that his guardian angel was in fact Captain Weisler. Again, this other shot of Kristen Marie, and it's this shot reverse shot thing with, in the very frame after this, you see the front of the bus that's about to hit her. And it's an important aspect from a film perspective to show that she's doing this not out of rash, spur of the moment, hot-blooded, I got to run out into the street because I can't take the pressure of the situation that I'm in right now, but rather I'm running into the street deliberately to get hit by a car because I can't take it anymore. Of course, it's paradoxically related to the article itself being about suicide, and the use of this shot reverse shot immediately before she's hit by the car demonstrates that this was a deliberate suicide, not a happenstance thing where she flees the situation, but rather where she flees her life as a whole. Without the use of this, it took me a long time to get this actual frame caught because it was so fleeting, but it was important enough that even though between the shot reverse shot of her and the bus was probably in the span of less than a second, both of them, it demonstrates that this was an on-purpose act and not one that came about by happenstance. And again, kind of shows the final digression of her transformation throughout the movie, which was in opposite from Captain Weisler. And of course, these last two elements, or these last two slides here in my presentation, show the elliptical storytelling method, where there was a high concentration on showing all the acts in a relatively refined period of time, where Dreyman was under surveillance to, okay, a few years here, fall of the Berlin Wall there, a couple years after that even, this ellipse starts to taper off, and we get less and less detail about a longer period of time here. And this is where we see jump cuts going from one place to the next, which we'll discuss a little bit more in the next picture, is a perhaps better example of that. Now, interesting thing they do with the sound here and the cinematography with the lighting is that this very disarming feel of lighting as compared to the very first slide, which was dimly lit and in 1984. Obviously, we are no longer in 1984 as the film has progressed. Now, this final scene is probably the best example of a jump cut, but still a little bit short. It shows Captain Weisler very unchanged from 2 years prior, where he was toting a little yellow bag walking along. So you see where the subject here, that is Captain Weisler and his bag, remains unchanged, while the scenery around him has changed quite a bit. Now, the setting of East Germany is still the same, and it's not a particularly happy environment with tons of graffiti on the walls and things that you see as he's walking along. Not a particularly happy existence to just go delivering mail door to door, as opposed to being decently mid-ranking level officer in the Stasi police. But now he's doing basically cheap labor. This jump shows him relatively uh, looking unchanged, but vastly different person than in the beginning of the movie. Uh, and then, of course, the great ending here, where he goes in and finds the book that was written for him. So these are some of the ways in which we see these film tools, as I keep saying, and these film techniques to drive home the point beyond what simply words in the picture could tell, using all these things in combination with each other to deliver a very, very impactful movie. I'm interested to hear what your analyses are of the elements that you saw that you saw used and utilized throughout the movie, and please put those in the comments down there for me below. And I'm interested in continuing the conversation.